Hey friends, my name is Mike Bigelow. Stella is an old friend of mine. Stella and I have roots in Macau. I was an elder in the congregation that Stella used to go to. I never knew Stella while she was a witness. We bumped into each other shortly after she left. I left the organization formally in 2012. And my decision to leave the organization was related to the lack of truth that the organization presents. I've always been a bit of an armchair naturalist. I love geology, I love the mountains. And today I'm in southern Utah. We left Macau about 18 months ago when COVID started getting bad. We had previously bought a house in southern Utah, and when COVID started to kick up, we contacted our tenants in Utah who were renting the house, and we asked if we could move into the house on March 1st of 2020. And they were some of my wife's friends in a local congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were very agreeable, they were fine. So we moved into our house near St. George, Utah on March 1st of last year. We picked this area just because it is stunningly beautiful, but it's also close to some of the very famous national parks in the United States. You may have heard of places called Bryce Canyon or Zion National Park, or certainly Grand Canyon National Park. We're within easy driving distance of all of those places. And it's also very close, or reasonably close, to the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, where I do a lot of climbing. And it was really in the Sierras that the Bible's account of Earth's natural history started to fall apart. Because every time I looked at natural history, I always looked at it under the worldview that everything was underwater 4,400 years ago. And the more time that I spent climbing in the Sierras and seeing the glaciers in the Sierras and seeing some of the trees close to the Sierras that you can go and see them today, they're over 5,000 years old. The whole natural history account that the Bible presents struck me as not being true, so I started researching it and ultimately came to the conclusion that the Bible's history, that humans were created from dirt 6,050 years ago, and that the whole planet was underwater 4,400 years ago, it not only stopped making sense, but it is provably false. So I've had a very enjoyable life since I left the organization. I'm able to travel to some beautiful outdoor places, which is where I am today. I'm in a place called the Pine Mountains. The Pine Mountains are still in southern Utah, but I'm up at about 3,000 meters right now, just around 9,000 feet. And I'm hiking up a little trail, sort of a training hike. I have a backpack with me with maybe 15 kilos of weight in it, just so I can be used to having a backpack on, so that when I go back to the Sierras, probably next week, that I'll be in pretty good shape for it. So as I walk the next little bit, I'll let you see some of what I see and tell you a little bit more about what I'm seeing and what it's like here. So I'm up here on a bit of a ridge. It's a rocky ridge, and one of the first things that kind of comes to mind when you see this is how we're looking at a mountain range that's sort of undergoing change. For example, here you see a very huge tree, probably a meter at the base. It's a very old tree that probably died many years ago, and there's no trees like that around here anymore. The trees that have grown up in its place are smaller, they're more stunted, and as this trail moves from down around 6,000 feet which I guess is what, about 2,000 meters, something like that. It's much drier down there low, and as the trail moves up, it kind of goes through different zones, and eventually when it gets up to about 10,500 feet, the trees start to get much smaller and gradually disappear. This trail's maintained pretty well. You can see how when trees fall, they come and they cut them down. And I'm getting high enough now so that I can start to get glimpses beyond the trees out to the mountains beyond. The trees that are here are a mix of evergreen trees, big pine trees. I'm not good at identifying what kind of pine trees there are. But if you look here, you'll see there's also deciduous trees. These are oak leaves. And down lower, there's some beautiful oak forests. Oftentimes when we hike around here, we see wild deer. It's a very lovely place. The climate here in the summer kind of goes through two different patterns. When we get a high pressure system that comes and sits over the desert southwest, it gets very hot. It'll get up Fahrenheit to as high as 118, 120, which I think is close to 50 degrees, but it's very dry. And then at other times, the climate becomes monsoonal. And similar to the monsoons that you get in Macau or the Philippines, these monsoons are a little bit different, because what happens is the air will get moist, and then every afternoon we will get tremendous thunderstorms, particularly in these mountains, where in the course of less than an hour, we easily could get 20 to 30 millimeters of rain. So when you look at this trail, you'll see that the trail's all washed out. And that's because over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, we've been in a real heavy monsoonal pattern. So if I stay up here too long today, it'll be raining and hailing so hard that this will be like a little mini river. It's amazing to see, but it's not really weather that you want to get caught out in. Because unlike Macau or the Philippines, because we're so high up, when those thunderstorms come through, they're cold. My wife and I came up here last weekend and we got caught in a hailstorm, and almost instantly the temperature went from a very comfortable maybe 28 degrees down to probably only about 10 degrees in a matter of 10 minutes. So when we got back to the car, we were soaking wet and shivering. This is a real pretty bush I'll show you. It's called a manzanita. And if you look at the bark looks a lot like mahogany. And the wood is kind of red, but it never gets big enough to be able to harvest and make furniture or anything out of it. It's just a nice, pretty, very common plant here. You can see up above, continuing to climb on a little bit of a narrow ridge, and it's mostly just walking on rocks. And then down, if we look this way, we can see where I started. That lush green meadow down there is called Pine Valley. It's a very tight-knit Mormon community. But Mormons are good people, just like Jehovah's Witnesses are good people. They just believe things that are provably untrue. And the Mormons, kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses, are the same, where if you stop believing the things that are untrue, they kick you out of your family. Probably you know that if you ever leave the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, it comes at a great cost when it comes to your old family and friends. I have 2 adult sons, and when I told them that I was leaving the organization, they made it very clear that they were going to shun me, which they have. But in the end, there's no going back. You can't just start re-believing something that's not true. These mountains can get a lot of snow. Up here at this altitude, anytime weather moves in during the winter, it moves into this area as snow. So last year the snowpack wasn't great up here, but it's not uncommon during the winter for the areas that you're looking at to have as much as 2 to 3 meters of snow on the ground. It's really beautiful to see. Since I moved to Utah, I got back into skiing. And one of the things that I've really come to enjoy is what they call backcountry skiing, where you put these things on your skis called skins, and you can use your skis to sort of walk uphill. So you pick an area where it's steep enough and safe enough, and you walk uphill and then get a beautiful run down snow that nobody else has touched. It's really a great blend of exercise, mountaineering, and excitement. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I guess the main thing that I like to communicate to people is that if you're struggling because you recently left the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, or if you're afraid of what it's going to be like when you get out, don't be afraid. Life outside Jehovah's Witnesses is rich, happy, fulfilling, and I would never have it another way.